Mushrooms for dessert? Hello and welcome back to Catch and Cook California. I'm Kevin. This is video number 8 in my series, Mushroom Foraging for Beginners. Today, we're looking at the delicious maple syrup flavored candy caps. That's a porcini.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yes. What a beaut.
Wow.
Porcini, baby. Look at the size of that. This little beauty is a candy cap. David Aurora mentions in here that a single candy cap, if it's slowly dried, can scent your whole house. And a number of people have told me too, if you eat enough of these and you go for a run, you'll actually sweat maple syrup smell. So this series is mushroom foraging for beginners, but I will say that this may not be the best beginner mushroom. And the reason being, I've seen a number of people on a number of outings pick a bunch of these and then pick a few lookalikes and throw them all in the same basket. So at least with this species, I would recommend this is not one you learn on your own, but it's definitely attainable. It is a mushroom that you can learn to ID, but just be meticulous. When in doubt, throw it out. Definitely make sure that you're not confusing these with a yellow staining milk cap, because these are not recommended and some of these are actually poisonous. So to start here, I'm just going to crack the gills on what is actually a candy cap, and you can see that kind of clearish white milk that's very distinct of the candy cap. And in contrast, this is a yellow staining milk cap, a cousin in the same family. As I crack this, you can see how it exudes that white milk from the gills. In this case, it's a little bit thicker of a white milk. And it's really important you let it sit for about 30 seconds to a minute, because you can see how now it's oxidizing, going through a chemical reaction, and that white milk is turning yellow. Now there are definitely distinct similarities between those yellow stainers and these, which are actually candy caps. So it's very, very important, especially in the beginning, if you have any doubt whatsoever, you throw these out. There's a little footage of finding an absolutely massive patch of candy caps under some oaks. Now sometimes I get very lucky and I find a whole troop of these beautiful candy caps, and sometimes, like these under pine, I'll only find 1 or 2 here and there. If that is the case, I just pick them up throughout the season and dry them individually, throwing them in a jar so I can use them all at once later on. We're going to use David Aurora's book, All That the Rain Promises and More, to key these out together. So the cap and the stalk are going to be burnt orange to orange, and in some cases a bit of a reddish orange color. Cap is small, never sticky or slimy, and it's going to be bald and often wavy at the margins in maturity. About 2 to 2.5 inches broad or smaller. The fresh gills are going to exude that watery milk, almost like a 1% or a non-fat milk. But as they get older, they may not have that milk. But if they don't have the milk, they typically have that distinct maple syrup aroma. Especially when you're starting out, don't mess with any of them unless you can actually see that milk. And remember to give it at least 30 seconds to a minute to watch the milk and make sure that that milk does not change color. The whole mushroom is brittle, snapping open cleanly like a piece of chalk. Veil, ring, and vulva are completely absent, clearly not in the family Amanita. The odor is sweet like maple syrup, and the taste is not peppery. So when you get to the end, you can actually give this one a little nibble. Spit it out, and you won't have any kind of pepperiness to it. And then the spores are white. So the mature cap is going to be bald. The center will be flat to sunken. In this case, it is sunken. Gills are broadly attached to the stalk or even running slightly down it. And that stalk will be slender and usually hollow at maturity. We'll find this in abundance in troops or groups under pine and oaks here in California. And this is one of those I really recommend drying. So again, if you're getting into mushroom foraging, get yourself a food dehydrator and a vacuum sealer. In this particular case, these are beautiful if you slowly dry them. Don't rush it. Don't do it at high temperature. A slow temperature dry. This is one of those that we use to make sweets like ice cream, pancakes, cookies. No joke. Hidden away, there's another nice one. There's a candy cap. So one of the places I really look is these sort of moss-covered landscapes. So when I'm down here under oak and under pine, that's what I'm looking for, is a lot of moss. When you see that moss established on the ground, I often find those beautiful burnt orange barbecue potato chip color popping right on out. Very distinct of the candy cap. So like I said, I look for moss-covered ground, and that's exactly what you're seeing here. Underneath this fern, we've got 3 beautiful candy caps, although that one in the lower left has been colonized by some kind of a mold. And when you look closely at all 3 of these, they look like they've been through the weather, probably through a lot of rain, so we'll leave them be. Here's a solitary candy cap. Here's a couple growing under tan oak. Remember, they do like those oaks as well as pines. Sometimes individually, sometimes in pairs. But it's important to note that these are not candy caps. These are not candy caps. These are not candy caps. It's important to note that there's all kinds of mushrooms you're going to see that look very similar to candy caps, but are most definitely not them. Some of these are also very toxic, and some of these have almost identical coloration. Now in these particular cases, we're looking at mushrooms that are not in the milk cap family, so when we crack the gills, they do not exude a milk. However, these are milk caps. These are orange milk caps. They look almost identical to candy caps, and while they don't have that distinct maple syrup aroma, if you were to throw these in with the rest of your candy caps, your bag would still smell like maple syrup. Now these last ones are candy caps. Once again, as you look closely, when we crack the gills, you can see that they exude a watery milk, and it does not change color. That is very important. I've picked about 24 of these now, so now that you've learned how to ID them, let me show you how to preserve them, and let me show you how to cook them. It smells so sweet. It's the craziest thing. It's like maple syrup. I cannot overemphasize the importance of a food dehydrator if you're getting into mushroom foraging. So I dry these overnight on a low setting, and once they're dry, all of the moisture content is gone. I can keep them stored indefinitely, or in this case, I'm going to turn them into a candy cap mushroom powder. I use a coffee grinder that I have specifically designated for this task so it doesn't taste like coffee. I'm going to start by pulsing, and then I'll turn it into a fine powder. And look at this beautiful essence of candy cap. That is what I'm talking about. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to start with a pan. I'm going to throw in 3 cups of heavy whipping cream. I know, it's a lot. This is definitely not a low-fat recipe. To that, I'm going to add my powdered candy cap, give it a quick whisk, and then I'm going to put it over medium-high heat, and I'm going to continue to stir to blend that candy cap powder into that cream. Once I bring it to a nice little simmer, I'm going to turn it off, give it one more stir, and then let it cool. Now, I want to set aside 6 eggs, and specifically, I'm going to isolate the yolk from the white. I'll save that white for later on. I can mix that in with my eggs for an omelet or scrambled egg, but for this recipe, we just want the yolk. So I've got 6 yolks here. I'm going to add in a half a cup of sugar, and I'm going to whisk that until it is fine and consistent. Once that's fully whisked in, I'm going to add my cream back in. Now remember, I want to let that cream cool so that I'm not cooking the eggs. I'm going to run this through a fine strainer, and yeah, you can see some steam coming off, but it is actually just warm, not hot. I'm using that strainer to make sure that I catch all of those fragments of mushroom, and all I've got is that fine mushroom flavor as I whisk it all together. I'm going to put some near boiling water in the bottom of an oven-safe pan, and I'm going to start filling ramekins, which are also oven-safe, and I'm going to fill those with what is to become my custard, or creme brulee. Once I've filled my pan, that's going in the oven at 325. Now the recipe I was using said to put it in for 20 to 30 minutes. I ended up having to put it in for 30 to 40 to make sure that they fully set. That's why I'm shaking these, to show that the center is not jiggling and that the creme brulee has set. After this, I'm going to throw it in the fridge for 4 hours, and then we're going to caramelize some sugar. I'm using castor sugar. It's a fine sugar between powdered sugar and regular sugar. Now let's fire up that torch and get to it. Will you look at that? Listen close. Perfectly cracked in there. Look at that. And then that delectable, beautiful, soft custard on the inside. Mmm. Perfect custard in there. Perfect crunchy layer on top. I'll be honest, I was a little worried because caramelized sugar has sort of a molasses flavor to it. And I was thinking, you know, maple syrup, molasses, might be a little too redundant, but you can totally pick up the candy caps in that custard. Mmm. This is one of those recipes that, not part of my culture. I'm not French, but growing up, my mom made creme brulee so often that if I heard my dad fire up the blowtorch from the kitchen, I knew we were having something exceptional. Diane's just rolling in, so I'm going to share this with her. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did so, please give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment. I love hearing back from you. Share the video. And until next time, happy winter solstice, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and keep the old ways alive.